Before that, let's start the show with a look back at the World Cup. Wales, as we've mentioned, becoming two-time World Cup champions. Gerwyn Price and Johnny Clayton living up to their pre-tournament favourites tags, beating Scotland 10-2 in Sunday night's final. Do you see this being the start of a dominant period for Price and Clayton in the World Cup?
I mean, it very well could be. For starters, as I've said many a time over the last couple months, these are two of the four best players in the world right now. Form is temporary. Johnny Clayton was not one of the top four players in the world for the first few months of this year. He might not be again a week from now. But he's still going to be, at least for a little while, still a top 10 player. He is a bit older, obviously relative to Gerwyn Price, but he is, he's north of 50. And while, we're still seeing Steve Beaton and Raymond van Barneveld play fantastic darts a decade beyond that, it becomes more and more difficult, and the drop can come out of nowhere. Look at Mervyn King this year. Just 2 years ago, he was within a leg of winning a major. Now he's very often within a few legs of winning just a single match on a given weekend. That's how quickly form can disappear, especially as you become older, especially as it becomes more difficult to keep your concentration up. But I don't see that happening anytime in the immediate future for Johnny Clayton, especially since he's a player who doesn't seem anymore, at least, to put more pressure on himself than he needs to. I think he was a player who might have early on, before he realized how good he was, put a little bit of pressure on him to make sure that he got through the events. But now that he realizes he's as good as he is, he plays more freely. And I think that will help him keep up this level for at least another 3 or 4 years, if not longer. And that means this Welsh team has a few years to go for it. The other thing that they have going for them is that they play really well as a team. And that's something that, we talk about it each year at the World Cup. We don't know how a pair is going to gel. It didn't matter as much in the past, because if you get out of that first round, you could go the rest of the way without having to play another pairs match till the final. And even then, you could lose that pairs match and still win because if you win 3 of the 4 singles matches, even losing the finals, the pairs match in the final doesn't matter. So the pairs didn't matter as much. Now it's obviously crucial. It's the entirety of this format. And the Welsh team, they're two good friends. They like playing with one another. They build up each other and they build off of each other. And that makes them a really difficult team to go against. Yes, they could have lost to Belgium. They very well should have lost to Belgium. Belgium outplayed them up until the very end of that match. But they figured out how to lift their game when they needed to, and they won. And then they were no match for Scotland in the final. I don't think it's going to be a dominant era per se. I think it's too tricky of a tournament. But as long as Johnny Clayton and Gerwyn Price remain anywhere near their current levels, they will be a team that is more difficult to play than whatever their rankings might state. And that's because of how good they are together. I think we have another few years where they should be the favorite entering the World Cup. And even if they're not the favorite, they're probably the second or third most likely team to win it. And I think we will see this pair win again, maybe next year, maybe the following year, maybe both of those years, because I think they're just too good to not win at least one more, if not a couple more.
Yeah, I think we're coming into a really interesting period of this tournament, the World Cup. And before I get on to that, just want to give a shout out to a few of our listeners. We said on the final day of the tournament, if you can go 7 out of 7, predict all 7 games correctly, then we'll give you a shout out. 3 of you managed to do that. So Willis, David Gannon, Philip Davies, they all went 7 out of 7. So congratulations to them. But back to this Welsh team, and it's not often me and you, Burton, we go into predictions for these events, we tip the same winner. But last week we were both in agreement when we recorded our preview show that for this World Cup, Gerwyn Price, Johnny Clayton, they were going to take some serious stopping, and they weren't going to be stopped. And that's exactly how it played out. And as you say, it's worth mentioning that things didn't go all their own way. Okay, they did in the final. It was a dominant win, 10-2. And I think last week I was saying I was hoping for a close final. I put the mockers on that. But every other round of the World Cup, we were treated to some very tight, dramatic games. And looking at the semi-finals, the game that was the most dramatic did involve Wales. It did go down to that last leg decider, and I think it was Kim Ibrex. He was waiting on 59. Johnny Clayton steps up, cool as you like, takes out 100 in 2 darts to put Wales through to the final. And at that point, you're thinking, was that the chance? Was that the game for the team, the favourites, to be knocked out of the tournament? Because we've seen it so many times in the past that the favourite, they'll go on and lift the title, but they'll have got through a wobble in the early rounds to get that far. So that was the scare that Wales overcome. But it's got to be said, they played some superb stuff the whole weekend. Right off the bat, first game up on the Saturday for them against Denmark, almost 100 average to beat them. Against Sweden, a minor scare, you'd say. They were 3-1 down, came back and won that one 8-5. And then the semi-final I just touched on there, a 96 average in the final as well to beat Scotland quite handily. Is this the start of a dominant period? I'm not so sure. I think we are already now a year off the next World Cup, so things can change that lineup for Wales. You'd imagine Clayton and Price, they're going to be number 1 and 2 for Wales for a while to come yet. And as long as they are, and they're still high up in the rankings, the bond they share that we've spoke about remains the same, then I think they are going to be the ones to beat. But beyond those two, you've still got some strong partnerships in there. And even the finalist, Scotland, Peter Wright, if he can find his form again, and with Gary Anderson, they're a contender for sure. I mean, you look at the weekend as a team, they weren't both firing on all cylinders, but they still made the final. And some other teams in there, Belgium, once they put their differences aside, produced some really good darts over the weekend. And Germany as well, how they dismantled England, the top seeds, that they're going to be in with a shout over the next few years. Australia, former winners. Netherlands, if Michael van Gerwen's back involved, if he's not, Dirk van Dijvenbode, Danny Noppert, they're going to be contenders. England, Nathan Aspinall, Luke Humphreys, if they come into the fold, 2 new players in the event. And Northern Ireland, okay, they went out in the group stage this year, but you'd imagine that one of the hot properties in darts, Josh Rock, is going to be in that team next year, and that's going to have an impact on things. So as much as they played well at the weekend, and they are going to be the favourites going forward, I think there's still a lot of teams that we can say are going to make it difficult for them next year.